All right, summer school crew. So, lot going on. But with that being said, I'm still here. So, we have summer school math 7 review. This is what you'll be working on with Mrs. Carbone, and then you'll have the help of another math teacher in class. So, this is your review. This is your final review. It looks like it's anywhere between 10 and 15 questions. With that being said, this mirrors or looks exactly like your final exam that you'll take on Thursday. Okay, so the final exam on Thursday looks like this. We're going to do a quick run through, and hopefully this kind of guides you and gives you some feedback before you take the test on Thursday. So you're going to see a very similar question to this, where they tell you that a variable, in this case, m equals 7. M is 7. Now they want you to find out the solution to this equation. So like I did here, you got to kind of go through and you got to kind of guess and check. You don't have to show all the work that I did, but that would be the best thing to do. So if you look at A, I did 9 times 7 minus 1 equals 53. Well, 63 minus 1 is not 53. 62 does not equal 53, so it's not that answer. Okay, remember, you're substituting in 7 wherever you see m. And I did that by doing parentheses. When I put that in there with parentheses, that automatically turns into multiplication, right? Because 9 in this A problem is a coefficient, 3 in the B problem is a coefficient, C in the 4 with the 4 is a coefficient, and then in D, 3 is also the coefficient. So if you look, I did the same thing with B, C, and D. Let's go back to C, though. When you plug in 7 and you go 4 times 7 minus 1 equals 27, when you go through and you do the work, 28 minus 1 is 27. 27 equals 27. Okay, that's when you're looking in the mirror and you see 27 or you see yourself. Those are equal to each other, so C is the correct answer. Number 2, we have an integer problem. Okay, so we're dealing with integers, except it's in word form. So a hot air balloon is 450 feet above sea level. Okay, so it's above sea level. Okay, so that means that it's a positive number. It ascended 120 feet. So ascended, in this case, means it's increasing or going up to an additional 120 feet. So how many feet above sea level is the balloon now? As you can see, I showed my work. I drew a little bit of a balloon. I showed an arrow going up, showing that it's going up farther, 120 more feet. And then I showed you my problem. 150 feet plus 120 feet equals 570 feet above sea level. So you want to have the units. You want to have feet. You don't want to have inches. You don't want to have meters. You want to represent the right unit. So that would be the correct answer for that. Let's look at number 3. Number 3 can be done a couple different ways. You want to evaluate this expression. Remember, this is an expression. It does not have an equal sign. Okay? The only difference in this situation is this expression is not going to have multiple terms. It's going to end with a number answer, and that's because we don't have any variables involved. So keep that in mind. So if we look at the first way I did it, I actually distributed. I did the sharing property by multiplication, and I got negative 24 minus 32 divided by 2 minus 21. Now, you have to work left to right, and in this case, you have to divide, right, before you can subtract. Okay, so in this case, negative 56 divided by 2 is negative 28. Negative 28 minus 21 is negative 49. Now, over here, this is probably the safer bet to do it because it's not as confusing, but you can use PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. If you do that, you do what's in parentheses first, you get negative 7. Negative 7 times 8 is negative 56. Negative 56 divided by 2 is negative 28. And negative 28 minus 21 is negative 49. Okay, so simple question. You're going to have a question that's very similar to that one. Now, simplifying the following expressions. We are doing pretty much the same thing we did in number 3, except now we're dealing with variables and variable terms. So as you notice, I wrote on this, like terms. You have to put together those that are alike. The variables and the exponents decide that. So in this case, the x's hang out with the x's, and the constants, or the numbers, 3 and -9, have to be combined because they're together. So combine like terms. So 6x plus 4x is 10x, and 3 minus 9 is -6. Think of it this way. Integers. If I have $3 and I spend $9, I now owe, or I'm in the hole, -$6. So that's why I have 10x minus 6. This is your answer. Don't solve for x. You don't know what x is. You have to stop here. Okay? Number 5. This is distribute. This is sharing by multiplying. What do I mean by that? I did my swoop arrows because I'm sharing the -5 to the 3x, and I'm sharing the -5 to the -4. When I do that, -5 times 3x is 15x, and -5 times -4 is 20. Distribute. All right, you're going to have a chart that looks just like this. Convert the following numbers. Fraction in our first row, right up here in our first row where we have 1/10. If you do 1 divided by 10 in your calculator, you get 0.1. That's your decimal. You take 0.1 and you multiply that by 100, you get 10%. So that's how we're doing it, right? Now, we're going to have to move a little bit back and forth, but it all depends on the numbers they give you. They gave you the fraction, you divide, and then you multiply by 100. Okay, number 2, they only give us 0.3. So if you look on the screen, I multiplied that by 100, and then I got 30%. Remember, when we go from a percent to a fraction, it's part over whole. That's why you saw me write 30 over 100. If I were to take a test and I got a 30%, out of 100 questions, I only got 30 correct. Now, you have to simplify, meaning you have to reduce it to lowest terms. So I just canceled out one group of zeros. And when I end with that, I get 3/10. I cannot reduce that any further. Okay, the final one. It starts with a percent. So when that happens, 25%, right? 25% going to a decimal. 25 is represented. You put the decimal point to the farthest right. So right by the 5 it starts. To the right of the 5, you see the decimal point? And you move it 2 places to the left, right? When you do that, you get 0.25. Or, if you think of money, 25 cents. Makes perfect sense, right? 25 cents of a dollar is 25 cents, right? The other thing, part over whole, think money. This is 25 over 100, right? Your part is the 25, your whole is the 100, okay? So with that being said, think money again. If I reduce 25 over 100, 1/4 of a dollar is a quarter. So that's why 25 over 100 reduces down to 1/4. So keep that in mind. Pretty easy though. Question 7. Okay, now here it is. This is everything coming together. This is multi-step equations with distributive property, with combining like terms with variables on opposite sides. Now remember, I put DCVS or DCV SADME to the right, just to show you, right? You distribute, you combine like terms. Variables are on opposite sides, but you see in my arrow, you want to bring those variables together. Okay, bring those variables together if you have to. Okay, subtract, add, divide, multiply, and then exponents. It has to be done in that order. Okay, so it has to be done in that order. Now, when I did that, I had to distribute first because I do have distributive property. So I did 5 times 2x, which is 10x. 5 times -3 is -15. I brought the 13 down, and I brought the 38 down, so everything's in line. You have to show your work this way. Okay, that's how you get full points, and that's how you get to the right answer. Now, I have like terms on the left side, right? 13 and -15 are like terms. They're constants, so they're numbers. So 13 minus 15 is -2. I bring down the 10x. 10x minus 2 equals 38. The 38 still needs to come down. Now I'm down in the SADME section, right? Inverse operations. What is the opposite of subtracting 2? Well, yep, Mr. Frechette, you're right. Adding 2. So if I add 2 on the left side, I have to add 2 on the right. My -2 plus 2 cancel out. That's a 0 pair. They're gone. Okay, so if you look over to where my arrow is, 10x is the only thing left on the left side, and 38 plus 2, which is 40, is the only thing left on the right side. Now, when you do that, your final step is inverse operations again. When I have 10x or I have a coefficient of 10, that's multiplication. What is the opposite of multiplication? Opposite of multiplication is division. So we're dividing each side by 10. 40 divided by 10 is x equals 4. Okay? You're going to have a similar problem to this. You probably will not see variables on opposite sides where you have to bring those together, but you will see it next year or in the fall when you start 8th grade. Okay, we didn't talk too much about this. Hopefully they're talking about it with you with the math teacher who's filling in for me. But solving an inequality, remember this. You have different inequalities, okay? You have less than. You have greater than, okay? You have less than or equal to, okay? You have greater than or equal to. In this case, we're only dealing with greater than, okay? This is greater than, okay? This is less than, right? So you're following the vertex. You got the vertex, and then you have the opening or the mouth. Now, if the mouth is going to swallow something, that means you're dealing with greater than. If the vertex is pointed in the opposite direction, you're dealing with less than. So let's look at it this way, so I give you an idea. Let's say I have the variable x, and I write the inequality less than. Notice how the vertex is facing the x. X is less than 1. Same thing here. I'll write an x. Let's write another x. X is greater than 1. All right, it's going to swallow the x. That's why it's greater than. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, if I were to add just little lines under here, which you're not going to see those till next year, but that means less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. And equal to is what it means. X can either be less than or equal to 1, or X can be greater than or equal to 1 if I'm talking about it that way. Now, this is just an equation. Think of this greater than sign as just an equals, except you got to keep the greater than sign in there. So what ends up happening is we're doing the same thing, inverse operations. The opposite of adding 6 is subtracting 6. You have to subtract 6 on both sides. The 6 is crossed out because that's a 0 pair. The 3x comes down. 3x is greater than 15. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, so you have to divide by 3. If you divide by 3 on both sides, you have x is greater than 5. You notice that I kind of kept my greater than sign out of there, thinking of this as an equals. Don't make that mistake. Okay, you need to keep the greater than sign in there because you're going to have to graph it. Look at my number line. I put a 0, I put a -5, and I put a +5. I did that because x is greater than 5. That's one of my answers. How do I graph this? Anytime I have just the inequality sign, like greater than or less than, it's an open circle. That's why my circle is open. If it's greater than, I always shade to the right. If it's less than, I always shade to the left. So in this one, I had an open circle at 5, and I shaded it to the right. That is correct. Okay, so let's look at number 9. Number 9 is Cameron earns $180.25 for 25 hours of work. At this rate, how much does he earn? This is setting up a proportion. You have to set up a proportion where the units line up. Okay, so the units, 180.25 or $180.25 over 25 hours. And then you have your X value, which is what we don't know. We don't know how much money he's going to make in 40 hours. That's what we need to know. And then we have 40 hours. See how money lines up as the numerators and the denominators line up as the hours. Very important. You cross multiply. When you cross multiply, you get 7210 equals 25x. The opposite of 25x, that's multiplication, is division. You divide by 25. Your final answer is $288.40. Okay, so let's wrap this up. We have to be able to calculate mean, median, mode, and range. If you look here, out of this set of data, I did the whole thing. Mean is average. You add up all those data points, you divide by 7, you get 19. Median, you have to put the data in order from least to greatest. Okay, when I did that, you cross off each section, you get to a true middle because there's only 7 data points, and that's 16. Most often is 11, And then we have our greatest minus least with our range, and that's